So we are going to get this all cleaned up for her and hopefully deter any more dumping. It is a corner lot and there's a whole lot to do, including clearing up her backyard, which has a ton of debris in it. We're going to get this looking so much better for her today.
He walked away from a 2-decade corporate career with barely a warning, carrying the weight of past credit card debt to mow lawns for complete strangers. No TV crew or a guaranteed paycheck, just a lawnmower, a phone camera, and what many people thought was a terrible idea. In fact, most people would have called it a midlife crisis. Instead, it turned Sean Stockman into one of YouTube's most beloved creators. But before the million subscribers, there was debt, self-doubt, and a decision that could have gone spectacularly wrong. Here's what really happened. The corporate life he walked away from. Before he was the man with the weed eater and the work gloves, Sean Stockman spent about 2 decades living a completely different life. According to his own telling, in a candid reunion podcast with an old college friend, he spent close to 20 years working in Detroit's automotive industry. This wasn't a side hustle. It was a stable career that provided for his growing family. But here's what most people don't know. Corporate America wasn't Sean's first chapter. Years before he ever sat behind a desk, he was editing wedding videos on the side, starting around 2004, and he even shot weddings as a second shooter alongside a friend for years afterward. He loved it. He has said the work made him feel creative in a way his day job never quite did. But he also had a young family to support, and freelance wedding videography wasn't going to pay the bills the way a steady corporate paycheck could. So he built a life split in 2. Weekdays in a cubicle, weekends and evenings behind a camera. By every outward measure, Sean had made it. A secure paycheck, a respected title, and nearly 2 decades with one company. He wasn't job hopping. He wasn't chasing the next promotion out the door. He was, by his own admission, someone who battled imposter syndrome the entire time, quietly convinced someone was going to find out he didn't know what he was doing, even though he did. That's exactly what makes his exit so hard for people to wrap their heads around. This wasn't someone escaping a toxic workplace or a boss who made his life miserable. This was a man leaving behind something that, on paper, was working. So the question isn't about money or job security. It's much simpler. If the job was so good, why did he leave? The debt story he doesn't hide from. Before any of the corporate stability, before any of the YouTube success, Sean and his wife went through something a lot of young couples quietly struggle with. They got married young, started their family young, and like plenty of newlyweds, they got their first credit card and, in Sean's own words, forgot that you actually have to pay it off. The balance crept up and up until they had accumulated real, uncomfortable debt. Here's the part that makes it interesting. Around that same time, Sean was moonlighting as a wedding videographer, and every dollar he made from those weekend gigs went straight toward paying that debt down. His corporate income supported the family. His wedding money became the debt payoff fund. It was a grind, month after month, watching a number slowly tick towards zero. And when they finally hit it, when the debt was completely paid off, they didn't just quietly move on. Sean and his wife celebrated the milestone with an expensive dinner at a high-end restaurant, put, somewhat ironically, on a credit card. It became a full-circle moment for them, a marker of a goal that took real sacrifice, including nights where his wife put their kids to bed alone while Sean sat behind an editing timeline until the early hours. That small story says a lot. Long before Sean inspired strangers to start over, he and his wife were living that lesson themselves. So if the corporate job was already a grind and the debt was already behind him, what actually pushed him toward picking up a camera and pointing it at an overgrown lawn? The pivot nobody saw coming. Here is where the story gets interesting. Sean did not storm out of his office in some viral act of rebellion. According to his own account, shared in a reunion podcast conversation with an old friend, the actual spark was almost embarrassingly small. One night, scrolling YouTube Shorts before bed, the algorithm served him a video of a stranger cutting overgrown grass. He found himself completely relaxed, watching a total transformation unfold. His wife walked in, heard the sound of a weed trimmer coming from the bedroom, and asked what on earth he was doing. He didn't fully know the answer yet, but he kept watching that creator's channel, fascinated that an entire genre existed around something as simple as lawn care. The real idea clicked days later, while driving his son to school. He passed an abandoned preschool, completely overtaken by weeds, and thought about how satisfying it would be to knock it all down and make it look right again. He grabbed the cheapest tripod he owned, his phone, a weed whip, a blower, and a mower, and told his wife he had a crazy idea. She thought he was a little nuts. He went anyway. He filmed the entire cleanup, edited the whole thing on his phone using a free app, since he didn't even own professional editing software anymore, and uploaded it to a brand new YouTube channel almost on a whim. Within a couple of days, that first video had 13,000 views. For a man who wasn't chasing an audience, who genuinely didn't know what he was doing, that number stopped him in his tracks. There was no media company backing him, no producer handing him a concept. This was one guy with 2 decades of corporate discipline and an old wedding editing skill set, deciding to point that same energy at a stranger's overgrown lawn instead of quarterly spreadsheets. There was no guarantee anyone would even watch, but they did. Which raises the real mystery here. How does a guy with a phone and a weed eater end up building a following of over 1 million people? The turning point came from an unexpected direction. As the channel grew, word reached his workplace, and his boss and his boss's boss noticed something had changed in him. He wasn't giving the same maximum effort he always had, and eventually they connected the dots to his weekend YouTube channel. Instead of treating it as a problem, they told him flat out that he clearly had something special, that he looked genuinely happy doing it, and that he should go pursue it. They even told him his 20 years of experience would always be there to fall back on if things didn't work out. That kind of support from the very people he feared judgment from most made the decision less of a leap and more of a landing. It wasn't a knee-jerk resignation. By his own account, there was a lot of prayer and conversation with his wife and close friends before he made it official and left his corporate career to run Midlife Stockman full-time. It was the first time in his life he had ever been self-employed, and he has openly admitted that it was, and still is, a little scary. Once he went full-time, the channel exploded. One abandoned lot cleanup became a movement. He wasn't chasing views with drama or manufactured conflict, the tactics so many creators lean on. Instead, he leaned into something almost old-fashioned, showing up, doing the work, and letting the cameras roll. His channel crossed 600,000 subscribers within roughly a year and a half of that first video, and has continued climbing past the 1 million mark since. What's remarkable is how fast that growth happened compared to how long it took him to build his corporate career in the first place. 20 years to build one kind of life. A fraction of that time to build an audience most creators spend their entire careers chasing. But growth alone doesn't explain why people can't stop watching. What is it about Sean Stockman that turned casual viewers into a devoted online community? The moment that changed the channel forever. It wasn't a single viral clip or a lucky algorithm break that built this channel into what it is today, at least not entirely. There was one specific moment Sean has openly discussed that reshaped everything. The city had asked him to help clean up a particular property. While he was there, a man confronted him, upset about his presence in the neighborhood. The situation escalated to the point that police were called, and Sean's camera was rolling through the entire interaction. By his own description, there was a racial dimension to that confrontation, and he has said he didn't fully understand what the man had been through or what led him to react that way. Rather than react defensively, Sean has said he tried to extend grace in the moment, reminding himself that everyone carries a story he can't see. The video ended up reaching a huge new audience, many of whom had never heard of Midlife Stockman before. And what happened next surprised him just as much. Those new viewers didn't stop at that one video. They went back through his entire library and discovered the channel wasn't about conflict at all. It was about consistent, quiet acts of service. And that's what kept them subscribed. He has since said he wishes the confrontation itself had never happened. That he wishes the man had felt safe rather than threatened by his presence. But he has also pointed to the flood of supportive comments that followed, from people across every background, as proof that his actual community understood exactly who he was. So the man is authentic on camera. But what about off camera? Who is Sean Stockman when the phone isn't recording? The family behind the channel. This is where the story shifts from inspiring career pivot to something a lot more personal. Sean is not out there mowing lawns alone by choice. He is a husband and a father of 4, and by his own account, that role shapes almost everything he does on camera. His wife's name is Tessa, and together they've built a life that, according to Sean, directly influences the way he approaches every single property he cleans. He has said that before starting any cleanup, he asks himself a simple question. If this were his own home, how would he want it to look? And what would he want for his own kids playing in that backyard? That's not just a marketing angle. Multiple profiles describe his approach as deeply personal, involving far more than basic yard work. We're talking about fixing broken fences, building stairs, and clearing genuinely dangerous debris from properties that residents could not safely handle themselves. After 22 years managing purchasing for multinational companies, Sean now spends his time building stairs and fixing fences for strangers, unpaid, on his own time, with his own hands. That's a complete reordering of priorities, and according to Sean himself, his own kids are never far from his mind while he's doing it. But where did this instinct to care for others so intensely come from? The answer traces back to something far more painful than a messy backyard. When Sean was just 10 years old, he lost his father to cancer. For a child that young, losing a parent doesn't just create grief. It creates a void, one that someone else eventually has to help fill. For Sean, that someone was his father-in-law. Long before Tessa and Sean were even married, it was his father-in-law who stepped into that role, teaching him the hands-on skills that would later define his entire YouTube career. The stairs he builds, the fences he repairs, the physical labor he shows every single week, all of it traces back to lessons learned from a man who chose to fill a gap that cancer had left behind. It's a detail that reframes everything. This isn't just a guy who got bored of his desk job. This is a man whose entire skill set and sense of purpose was shaped by loss, and by someone who refused to let that loss define him. And it recontextualizes every single cleanup video too. When Sean fixes a broken fence for a stranger or builds a set of stairs for someone who couldn't afford to hire it done, he isn't just performing a random act of kindness for the camera. He's repeating, almost ritually, the exact kind of hands-on care that once filled a void in his own life. It's the same lesson passed forward, just with a different family on the receiving end each week. So if the personal story explains the why, what explains the how? How did one man's grief and a phone camera turn into a movement with over 1 million people behind it? Building the MLS community. Sean didn't just build an audience, he built what fans now call the MLS community, short for Midlife Stockman. This isn't a passive group of subscribers clicking a button once and forgetting about the channel. Through platforms like Patreon and merchandise sales, this community actively funds the equipment and resources that keep his cleanups free for the residents who need them. That funding model matters more than it might seem at first glance. The people whose yards Sean cleans never pay a cent, and the entire operation runs on the goodwill of viewers who believe in the mission enough to open their wallets for strangers they'll likely never meet. In a sense, every subscriber who chips in becomes part of the crew, even if they've never picked up a rake. Sean has been open about wanting every single viewer to feel like part of something bigger, even acknowledging he can't personally thank 1 million people individually. Instead, he's tried to build a culture around a phrase he never expected to take off. Not perfect, but better. He's said it started as something he genuinely believed, not a marketing slogan, and yet it eventually became the exact phrase printed on thousands of shirts sold to his own community. That phrase says a lot about the man himself. He isn't claiming to have all the answers or a perfect life. He's claiming something smaller and more believable, that things can always get a little better. 1 yard, 1 conversation, 1 action at a time. It's a philosophy that has clearly resonated far beyond just the people whose lawns he's cleaned. Fans who live nowhere near Detroit describe his weekly uploads as a weekly ritual that starts their week on a better note, that starts their week off with a better mindset. One longtime viewer described watching him for 2 straight years, following the channel from its early days, with a small following all the way through to its first 1 million subscribers, and said what kept her watching wasn't the yard work itself. It was watching someone restore dignity to people and places the rest of the world had written off. But after building a community this loyal, has Sean actually changed? Where things stand now. As of the most recent reporting, the channel was closing in on 1 million subscribers, with trackers placing him right on the edge of YouTube's gold play button milestone. For a man who started with nothing but a phone and free editing software, that number alone tells you everything about how far this channel has come. What's notable is what hasn't changed. Reports consistently describe Sean as still doing the work himself, still showing up at properties unannounced, still framing every project around the same question of what he'd want for his own family. There's no indication of him stepping back from the hands-on cleanups to become a purely behind-the-camera personality, which is often what happens once a channel reaches this size. He has also spoken about running marathons in his past, something he hasn't done in around 5 years. A small detail that suggests the physical demands of his current mission have simply replaced one form of endurance with another. It's a fitting trade, in a way. He's swapped one grueling, disciplined pursuit for another. Just one that happens to help other people instead of only himself. What also hasn't changed is the tone he brings to every interview and every conversation about his own success. He's been careful to credit his community rather than take sole ownership of the channel's growth, repeating the idea that this was never meant to be about him individually, but about what a group of people can build when they decide to show up for each other consistently. A man spent 22 years building a stable corporate career, walked away with his employer's support, and turned childhood loss and a father-in-law's hands-on lessons into a full-time mission of showing up for strangers. There's no scandal here, no hidden secret waiting to be exposed, no falling out, no controversy, no cover-up. In a corner of the internet that often thrives on conflict and manufactured outrage, Sean Stockman's actual story is almost disarming in how uncomplicated it is. A stable career, a quiet burnout, a pivot rooted in grief and gratitude, a community built one overgrown lawn at a time. Maybe that's exactly why it's resonated with over 1 million people. In a landscape full of manufactured drama, viewers found something they didn't expect. A story that was simply true. Just a midlife pivot that turned into something far bigger than one man cleaning up one yard, built instead on family, on grief transformed into purpose, and on a phrase that somehow ended up on thousands of t-shirts. Not perfect, but better. That's the real story behind Midlife Stockman, the corporate exit, the family history, and the loss that quietly shaped every single cleanup he's done since. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories behind your favorite creators, and drop a comment letting us know who we should cover next.